Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. One of the main objects of criticism that Plutarch targets in his work on moral virtue is the Stoic school, and specifically their views on what they call the ruling part and whether or not there's a conflict between reason and emotion. The Middle Platonists that Plutarch belongs to and Aristoteleans think that there is a set of different parts of the soul. There is a rational part and irrational part or parts. The Stoics said, no, it's all just one ruling part, and it can be rational or irrational depending on what's going on. And so Plutarch is going to first present this and then criticize it at, about the 1/3 point in his discussion. So he's going to say, some affirm that passion or emotion is not essentially different from reason, nor is there any quarreling or conflict between the two or even strife. But really what happens is just one faculty of reason is converted. It turns literally trophane into one direction or the other of the both. And why wouldn't we notice this? He says, they say it escapes our notice because of the suddenness and swiftness of the change. We don't perceive that it's the same part of the soul that's actually doing all these things. And he's going to give us some examples. Desiring, and then it says change to aversion in the translation here, but it's literally repenting, metanoia, feeling bad about what it is that we did, or getting angry, or being afraid, being swept along by pleasure. And so what ends up happening is the same part of the soul gets swept away, carried away, and then recovers itself after that, but it's all the same rational or ruling faculty, what the Stoics called the hegemonikon, right? So he's going to say that, furthermore, they say that passions are actually bad opinions, doxai, right? And judgments, krises. And this is happening in the entire directive faculty, the hegemonikon. They're not happening just in one part of the soul, a certain part of the soul, but they're, like he says, inclinations and yieldings. And then here he's going to use some Stoic terminology, a sense, sun katatheses, and impulses of that. So when we feel anger, for example, or fear, or pick any other emotion, envy, even elation, what's happening is that we have some sort of opinion or judgment that is being made. This is a good thing that is present to me, and it's, appropriate for me to rejoice in it. Those are a couple different judgments right there. And that's all happening in this rational part of ourselves. And then, we could just kind of get dragged along by it. The rational part is all shook up, but then, when we're no longer feeling that emotion so strongly, we're back to reasoning about it. And Plutarch says, listen, this is pretty implausible. This is not what we actually encounter or experience. He says that this doctrine is contrary to what's translated here as the clear evidence of our perceptions. A little bit more literally, it's contrary to the activity, paratein energean, what it is that we actually observe when we feel an emotion, and to our perception of things, aesthesin, how we see things to be the case. So he starts out first with the why we could be fooled about this, that the Stoics say, it's very sudden, we don't pay close enough attention, and suddenly we're angry, or we're sad, or we're fearful, or something like that. So he says, well, we don't actually perceive this supposed change, this metabole, from, for example, desiring to judging. Desiring is an emotional thing. Judging is a rational thing. We instead see, or we don't also see a change from judging to desiring. What we see is doing both of these things, right? And he says that we experience distinction and conflict between passion and reason. And he's going to give us an example of somebody who loves, right? A lover doesn't stop loving, feeling eros, desire, when they reason that they must restrain this love and fight against it. They also don't they give up the process of reasoning and judging when they're softened by desire and yield to love. They've got both of these things going on at the same time. They experience this within them, right? So he says we perceive ourselves going between both reason and emotion and participating in both of them. So we oscillate, we waver, but they're both there at the same time. It's not like we only have one part of ourselves that is either emotional at this time or rational at this time, and somehow it goes back and forth. So he's saying, listen, what we actually do see within ourselves is a distinction, a difference, diaphoras, and conflict or contradiction. And he says, those who assume that desire becomes the controlling faculty at this point in time, and then suddenly it's reason that arrays itself against desire. He's got a really great analogy here. Are like people who are saying that the hunter and the beast that they're hunting is actually the same thing. It's just, right now it's the hunter, right now it's the beast. And it just shifts back and forth. Now, in certain shows and stories, we do find out that a person has split themselves into two, and they have to reconcile them eventually in the end and figure out which is which. But does that make sense for a hunter and a beast? No, they have to be different things. And he says, these Stoics are overlooking something that's pretty clear. We have in these cases not a changing of only one faculty, a rational ruling faculty, but two things that are struggling and fighting with each other. And then at considerable length, he's going to look at a possible objection. This may in fact have been one that is raised by the Stoics. We're going to look at that in more detail separately because it does deserve its own discussion, but we'll just throw it out there. You could say that the deliberative faculty, the part of us that should I go this way or this way, and it's carrying things out rationally, can be divided by two conflicting lines of reasoning. So I might think, I should go to the party because it would be a great opportunity for me to see some people who I haven't seen for a while, and I should be doing some networking. Plus, I told so-and-so I'd meet them there. And then you have the other line of reasoning. On the other hand, it's been a long week. I'm rather tired. It would probably be a good idea for me to rest up. Maybe that would be more useful for me. So we deliberate between these two things. And it looks like what we've got there is the same faculty, which now has a conflict within it. So if we can have that between two lines of reasoning, maybe that's the same thing as having a conflict between emotion or passion or desire and reason within us. And it's not a very good objection, because the Stoics do seem to be committed to saying, no, when you feel the emotion, you're already like changing the rational part, and there isn't reasoning going on. It's just emotion, or it's bad reasoning, bad opinions, bad opinion formation, bad inferences, bad judgments. So putting that aside, there is another very interesting discussion following this, where Plutarch is going to say it's not only from the conflict, or as is translated here, dissension, mache, but also from agreement, akolutheos, literally following along with each other, that we can see that the source, the arche, or we might say the principle of the passionate part, is something different from that of reason. And, this is again showing that there's a bifurcation or duplicity within us. Now, what he's going to bring up are examples where agreement could happen. But he's talking first about a little bit of conflict. So he says, here's some examples. It's equally possible to love a noble young person, well formed by nature for virtue. So that's a good kind of love that you're feeling towards them, right? And it's also possible to love an evil and profligate one, a lack of self-controlled one. And, love can go in two different directions, right? Same thing with being angry. We can become angry irrationally against our own children or parents, but we can also become angry rightly on behalf of parents and children against enemies and despots. So he says, okay, in some cases there's a conflict, right? You love the wrong person, there's a conflict between that love and what reason tells you need to do. But what if you're loving rightly? Well, then reason and emotion are, so to speak, on the same page with each other. And he says that when that happens, there is perception of persuasion and agreement on the part of passion, which is inclining the scales in favor of reason and increasing its power. So we can augment, we can have the right judgment. I think this person is worthy of being loved. And then the passion can say, yes, indeed, let me add some more to this. So he gives some great examples of this. He says that when a good person is lawfully married a wife, his intention is to treat her respectfully, to consort with her honorably and soberly. As time goes on, his intimacy with her has given birth to passion. When he perceives his love and affection increases by the exercise of his reason. So again, when young men happen on cultivated teachers, they follow them and admire them at first because of their usefulness. Reason says, hey, it's good for you to hang out with this person, learn from them. Later, they come to feel affection for them elsewhere, right? And he says this also happens with good rulers or magistrates in cities and good neighbors and relatives by marriage. In the beginning, we do the right thing that reason tells us we ought to do because of some consideration of usefulness. And then we get carried along into genuine affection. Reason, he says, draws along and aids in the persuasion of the passionate element. So you can't have reason persuading passion unless they're two different things. So, he's once again affirming the Platonic, also Aristotelean psychology over against the more unified Stoic moral psychology and rejecting this notion that it is the same part that we reason with and feel our emotions with.